Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dominion Payroll 11 a.m. webinar. People are still filing in from the waiting room, so we'll just talk at you for a second until we can get our critical mass. Today's topic is the vaccine. We've covered this before, and we're going to continue to cover it as it's definitely something that we receive a lot of questions about, and I know it's on your mind too as you join us today on this chilly Tuesday here in Richmond. We don't have a terribly long presentation today. We probably will be done in about 30 minutes. And then of course, you can submit questions. If you could do that using the Q&A feature on your screen, as opposed to the chat, that would be great. And that way we can do our best to answer those and then keep them for posterity and follow up if necessary. We also will be doing, I just real quick wanted to say, as people are still filing in, tomorrow we have another webinar at 11 o'clock. It's my semi-monthly HR Matters webinar. And tomorrow we'll be talking about recruiting and hiring in the COVID-19 era. My colleagues from our Dominion Payroll HR department, Megan and Cece, will be joining me for that. To talk about some interesting dynamics of hiring and recruiting and onboarding and employee engagement during the COVID era. Hopefully you are in a position where you are able to grow a little bit. And if so, you should tune in tomorrow and get some tips and best practices and also offer your own. We, as always, encourage feedback from you all. This is a two-way street of information. And we always like to hear your anecdotes of what's working and what's not out there in the marketplace. All right, but today's topic is the vaccine. And with me today, Tracy's going to hang out in the background and Kevin is going to be my co-anchor. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Leslie. How are you?
I'm good. I have power back on and heat and electricity, water. So I hope you do as well.
Yeah, covering all the basic essentials for a comfortable life.
Yeah, it got cold over the weekend. I was very happy to see the lights come back on.
For sure.
Hopefully all of our listeners are back in the comfort of a warm spot wherever you are.
I heard that it was colder in Dallas yesterday than it was in Anchorage, Alaska. So
oh my gosh.
That's a fun little trivia fact that we can all pass around.
Yeah, that doesn't happen every day for sure. I know we're here in Richmond, we're supposed to get more weather on Thursday, so hopefully it won't be as icy as it was this weekend. All right, well, hot topic today is the vaccine. I've covered this a couple times before, and I've just, continued to monitor, obviously federal guidance, but state level guidance, and then sort of what's happening in the corporate community around trends. So we're going to cover things today that you may have seen before, but we're going to add a little bit of an update around incentives and things you should consider. The EEOC, which is the agency that is dictating, for the most part, the vaccination do's and don'ts in the workplace, still has guidance on its webpage dated December 16th. So as with other agencies in this pandemic, we are looking for them to update that page again, but we just haven't seen it yet. I know that some members of the corporate community and the Chamber of Commerce have sent a letter to the EEOC asking for officially requesting additional guidance, particularly around incentivizing employees to get the vaccine, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But to date, this is what we know from the federal level. I do know that there are several states that have legislation pending around employee rights around the vaccine. I don't have a state-by-state analysis here today, mainly because I don't know that there is a list yet of confirmed legislation, but we will keep our eye on that. So you'll hear, and if you've tuned in before, you'll hear me say like a broken record, you might want to consult legal counsel, or you should consult legal counsel if you decide particularly to do a mandatory vaccination policy, just to make sure that you have all of your bases covered and in your state and locality. But today we're going to outline the federal state guidelines that we think are pertinent. And of course, if you have questions, just throw them in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them as best we can. All right, so moving on. Kevin, let's talk about the burning question that everybody has.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm going to sort of try and wear my small biz owner hat for today and bounce questions off you. And then you are our resident expert.
Oh gosh, don't be too hard on me.
So yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as we're thinking about, looking at our employee base, we're trying to figure out what's our vaccination policy. So, Leslie, should we have a vaccine policy for our workplace? And, what are our options in terms of should it be mandatory or voluntary?
Well, Kevin, I'm glad you asked. The answer to the first question is yes. That should be no surprise. I love policies. But yeah, you should have a policy in place, all jokes aside.
So Leslie, would this be like a temporary thing, or would it go into like the employee manual?
I wouldn't add it to the employee manual. Let's fingers crossed this is a temporary thing. I mean, unless you're in healthcare or education or some other field that already has vaccination policies in place for other types of vaccines that are more regular, like the flu, then you could add it. But if your business doesn't normally tread in those waters, this could be a standalone policy that I would recommend having employees distributing as a one-off to employees, so they don't have to wade through a handbook. And then also it would be best if they could acknowledge it somehow. So for instance, if you're one of our clients, you could send this out post it in iSolved and have your employees quote unquote sign it electronically. And it doesn't allow them to sign it until they've actually opened it. Now, whether or not they read it, we don't know, but they do need to open it. And so that's one way to do it. You could send it out by email. You could distribute it as a hard copy, and not sure what your situation is, but yeah, that's a good question. It should definitely be standalone for now. I sincerely hope that we don't get to a place in the future where this is something that everybody has to have in their handbook, but knock on wood.
Hear, hear. And then I guess, the very next question, knowing that we should have that policy in place and distributed to everybody, should it be mandatory or voluntary?
Great question. So I'm going to run through the risks and considerations of both, starting with mandatory. And I will mention that on our website, if it's not already there, it will be by the end of today. We do have sample versions of both mandatory and voluntary vaccination policies. In all transparency, I didn't write these samples. I grabbed them from an well-known HR resource. So they, of course, can be tailored to your needs, but they provide you with sort of the bones of what you need for your organization so you don't have to start with a clean slate. So at some point today, you might want to check out dominionpayroll.com and go to the COVID resources page and download those and see if they suit your needs. Okay, so mandatory policy, you really should be balanced with the overall risk of the virus to your organization, consideration of your job functions, what's the physical proximity of your workers to each other, to clients, to patients, and what would a 100% vaccinated workforce mean for your business? Conversely, what would it mean for you to have employees not like this policy? Would you have employees? Would you have a lot of your employees object to it? Would there be folks with disabilities or religious exemptions, or just simply don't believe in the vaccine? And if you just have to balance that with, well, if you're willing to deal with that piece of it, and we'll talk more about that in a second. If you're willing to deal with sort of any potential negative backlash or a large portion of your employees not getting the vaccine for whatever viable reason, as in favor of having your business survive. So you really just need to weigh those pros and cons and those trade-offs. And again, if you're in an industry like healthcare or education, right now you probably have your own guidelines that you've been that have been passed down or over from your governing body. So certainly by now you will probably have decided what you need to do if you're in those industries. And then what the EEOC says essentially is that you'll need to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities or sincerely held religious beliefs that would prevent them from getting the vaccine. We'll talk more about that in a second. You might have some workers' compensation claims if you have side effects. Again, this is for mandatory. If you're requiring people as a condition of employment to get the vaccine at some point when it's available to them, and if they have any side effects, they could, and if you offer workers' comp, they could file a claim. This is, again, more bullets on the mandatory risks and considerations for a mandatory policy. Just be aware that your non-supervisory employees have the right to discuss and even complain about your vaccine policy on social media and with each other in the break room. So just, be prepared how to handle that. Real important here, the second bullet, any medical information collected during the process must be kept confidential. I know you guys know this, but I always just have to reiterate it. This includes the employee's reason for not getting the vaccine. So if you have a situation where somebody has asking for an exemption, you want to get that in writing. We also have included or will include request forms for those exemptions on our website, so you can document those. I would put them in their employee file, separate from their general employee file that contains basic information like their resume and performance reviews. It's always good practice to have a separate medical file for any reason, not just COVID-19 reasons, but for any reason. That way, anyone who's going in to look in their normal file for a performance review won't stumble across any of their medical information. If you're a Dominion payroll customer and you use iSolved, you can easily partition that information electronically. And if you don't know how to do that, we're happy to help you. And so medical information could include their reason for not getting the vaccine, but also could include any answers to pre-vaccine questions. And if you've already gotten the vaccine or if you've gotten a flu vaccine before, there are a couple questions that they're going to ask you. The medical provider or whoever's administering the vaccine will ask you, like, are you pregnant? Do you have certain types of disorders or genetic, they might ask for some genetic information, or if anybody in your family has some sort of compromising condition. And so that type of information needs to be kept confidential. And again, I know you guys know this stuff, but just wanted to reiterate. And then if you do make the vaccine a condition of employment and somebody just doesn't want to get it and they don't have any protected reason to not get it, and you're like, well, then you're not going to work here anymore. You're really I would recommend running that by counsel just to make sure that you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed in your state and locality. And, maybe just to get ahead of the game, hopefully you won't have to terminate anybody, but if you do, go ahead and find counsel now, just in case, so that you have this scenario where somebody just doesn't want to get the vaccine. You'll be prepared and you won't be caught off guard. I do have a question here real quick. Emily asked, did I hear correctly that you'll be putting sample vaccine policies on the website? I don't see them there now. Just want to make sure I don't miss them. Yes, Emily, we will. I just asked our web team to post them this morning, so they might just be running a little bit behind, but certainly by the end of the day today, you'll see a vaccine section with sample mandatory and voluntary policies, as well as request forms for exemptions for religious and disability reasons. So thank you for asking that. Okay, and this is the last slide on the mandatory policy. Just as we all know by now, vaccine rollout is spotty. It depends on where you are and what people's risk levels are. So just know that if you do a mandatory policy, it might take some time for some employees to actually get that vaccine. And skipping to the third bullet here, you should allow employees to get the vaccine during working hours and compensate them for that time. I mean, and just like with anything mandatory that you're requiring, whether it's a vaccine or some sort of certification to keep their job, you should pay them for the time it takes for them to get that vaccine and allow them to take the time to get it. And then the second bullet here is scary, but just like I mentioned earlier, you might lose some people. I don't know. I put it up here as just something to consider. And hopefully not, but that's, whoops, I'm sorry. And then, but that's something to think about. Okay. Before I move on to voluntary, Kevin, did any of that seem, or hopefully some of that seemed clear as mud to you as my token small business owner?
No, that does make really good sense. I mean, really just, if I think the points are really valid, that if you're going to make this mandatory, you really do need to be as accommodating as possible, and making sure, first and foremost, that you're protecting the privileged information for people, and then being accommodating in terms of allowing people the time to get the actual vaccine. I think the thing really to consider, anybody that's going to go the mandatory route, is to think about the amount of time that this could potentially involve. If you have a workforce that spans 18-year-olds to 65-year-olds, the amount of vaccine that is out there, and the fact that it's 2 shots over 4 weeks. This isn't hey, everybody on Tuesday go to the CVS and get your flu shot. It's a little bit more involved than all that. So I think that you brought up a lot of really good points, and it's just really important to think both from the legal standpoint, but then also the logistical standpoint.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's, some people might, if you do a mandatory vaccine, you could give a call to like Better Med or Patient First or some other provider and have them come to you and do an event. And then you'd have to do it again 4 weeks later. It depends on your situation. Or you could have employees just go, give them the time to go and get it on their own, however they can get it. You can put together a list of locations, and certainly, allow them the time to get the first shot and the second shot. And then we'll cover this in just a second, and you are allowed to ask them you are allowed to ask for proof if they've gotten the vaccine or not. What you may not ask them is why they haven't gotten it yet. They might volunteer that information, and that's fine, but you can't ask them because that might reveal a disability. So yeah. All right. So that's mandatory. Let's move on to voluntary, which is definitely the more risk-averse option right now. It's certainly the one that's recommended in terms of just fewer risks to you. But again, like I said at the top, you need to really balance based on your needs and the nature of your industry and the nature of your physical workforce, what works best for you. I mean, if you can't keep your business running without 100% or 90% or a majority of your folks vaccinated, then you might want to consider a mandatory approach. Again, realizing that you might have to deal with some sticky situations. The voluntary approach sort of takes out the having to deal with people wanting to be exempt, because in this approach, they don't have to let you know if they have a disability. They just can opt not to get it. And that's fine, because the guidance right now is to, even if you get a vaccine, you're still supposed to wear masks and practice social distancing in the workplace. So it's not as if, I've had some people say, if I don't get the vaccine, it's going to be like so obvious, and it's like wearing a scarlet letter around. Well, at least initially, it's not, because everybody's still supposed to be wearing masks and distancing. So for right now, they don't have to worry about that if they decide not to get it. However, there are a lot of companies who are incentivizing folks to get the vaccine because it's incumbent upon the employer. OSHA says that you as an employer are supposed to provide the safest workplace possible, and that includes keeping your employees from getting a deadly virus. So be that as it may, a lot of employers are not mandating the vaccine, but they're trying to really make it very attractive to get it. So like we said, allowing paid time off, you could cover any costs, certainly allowing paid time off for side effects. I mean, if somebody needs to take a day off because they're sore or feel lousy after getting the vaccine, then just, in the long run, that's not a big deal. Hopefully not a big deal. And then, lead by example, get your own shot if that's something that you're willing to do, and then educate people make information available about the vaccine. And then the incentivizing piece is allowed. It's just kind of tricky, and we'll go through this in just a second. Sorry, I have an email. In recent years, wellness programs. So basically, if you want to offer cash or paid time off or some sort of gifts or something in order for people to get the vaccine, it could be considered quote a wellness program, which has been under scrutiny lately because it has been considered to be maybe discriminating against people who have disabilities. So for instance, a normal non-COVID wellness program might be, we're all going to lose 50 pounds and we're all going to run 10 miles a week or something. Well, if somebody has a disability, they can't participate and therefore they can't get the prize. So what we're saying here is that incentives are great, but if you have someone who's like, hey, I can't get the vaccine because of a disability, and so what, I don't get $100, that could be a sticky situation. And so one thing you could do if you really want to incentivize is maybe have a collective goal. Say, let's get to 80%. And if we meet that, we all get a day off. And then the people who have exemptions will also get a day off. And that's just the way it goes. And we'll talk more about incentivizing in a minute. You may have read in the news, there are a bunch of companies that are giving out pretty healthy cash incentives for people to get the vaccine. And that's their right to do so. They probably have consulted an attorney and made sure that everything is above board with that. So I would recommend doing that if you want to go that route. And then requiring masks, like I said, this last bullet down here, and social distancing, even after people are vaccinated, is still the best practice as recommended by the CDC. Okay. Like I said, with incentives, we haven't, and I didn't say this yet, but the EEOC has not put out specific rules about supporting cash or paid time off incentives for employees who get voluntarily get vaccinated. The EEOC has a new director in this new administration, so we expect that the new administration is reviewing everything carefully, and we hopefully will see some new updates soon. But like I said, wellness programs have been under scrutiny even before COVID, and so that's sort of what I think that's part of the consideration here. So if you'd like to proceed with incentives, that's great, but make sure you consult counsel. And then again, you could consider a collective incentive. So that way you don't have to worry about excluding people who have disabilities or other reasons for not getting the vaccine.
Leslie, I would just add or say that I like that both mandatory and voluntary programs, there's a good bit of overlap in terms of best practices, and something that we should all just be thinking about in terms of setting good examples, providing the education element. All of those things are going to really work towards, whether it's mandatory or voluntary, creating a successful program. And I think it's important to keep our eye on the ball that the end result of all of this is that we get back to a more normal workplace and can get to the business at hand of doing our work. So I just think some good points in both of these scenarios.
Yeah, I think that it's tricky because I've definitely had some clients say, it sounds like you're advocating for us to really strong arm our employees into getting the vaccine. And I'm not necessarily saying that, but I am saying that it is, right now it's what we have. to work with in order to get businesses back to some semblance of where we were, in society at large. And so that's what this is what we have to go on. And no, you don't have to require it. You don't have to have a policy. I'm assuming, though, if you're on this call listening, that you're thinking about it. And I think that's great. I think that clears up a lot of things for you and makes your path easier as a business owner or manager. And then it gives your employees an understanding of the direction that you're going in and the support they will have, regardless of what their thoughts are about the vaccine, whether they are into it or not. So I think it's just better for you to have something in writing, regardless of how you approach it. And then, like I said earlier, this is an international pandemic. It's a public health crisis. So, it stands to reason that your business will be better off, and it might be short-term pain. And I know all of you have already experienced a lot of short-term pain. It seems like long-term at this point. Hopefully it won't be any much longer if we can, get to a point where people are able to be around one another again. And this is right now is the only thing we have to go with. And it's your responsibility to provide a safe workplace for your employees, barring any bona fide exemptions. So there's my speech. Hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm advocating for you to strong arm your employees, because I certainly am not advocating for that at all. And let me jump in to some of those exemptions. Kevin, here's a good question that I'm hearing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, we absolutely need to be sensitive to this. And so, some employees may claim to have a disability or a religious belief to avoid getting the vaccine. As an owner or manager, how can we determine whether an employee's claim of disability or a sincerely held religious belief is legitimate?
Okay, I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but I wanted to include it so that you guys can download this later, which, by the way, it will be available later on our website. But you should treat every accommodation request consistently and assume that each request is bona fide. In the case of a disability, you would request documentation from a healthcare provider. And again, we will have, by close of business today, a request form for both of these scenarios, disability and religion. So you can use that as a starting point. That doesn't actually go anywhere, it just goes to their file. You don't submit it to the EEOC or anything like that. This is all happens between you and the employee. And if you have an HR department, great, use them. If you have counsel, maybe lean on that person. We're happy to help too if you need help deciphering what to do. But essentially, the disability one is a little bit "quote unquote" easier, because it's you need to get a healthcare provider involved and just have them sign off, just as if you would for a disability request in a non-COVID situation. So that's pretty straightforward. If it's an obvious if something's obvious, like if someone's 9 months pregnant and you may not need to shake loose a form from them. You can just say, okay, get it, you're 9 months pregnant, and then go from there. But if it's something that's not quite obvious, and they come to you with that, keep it confidential, of course, have them fill out the form, and then give them make sure they know exactly what's going to happen, which is you're not going to discriminate against them or retaliate or otherwise punish them, just as you would if they had a disability for any other, exemption for any other reason. And then they're going to continue to wear a mask and be socially distanced, just like everybody who gets the vaccine. So that's disability. And I will say also that your policy should include very clear guidance on who someone should go to with this type of exemption request. Don't just say contact management. Let them know who to go to, because it could be a very sensitive conversation. They might be sheepish. They might, they might have, and then they might go to the wrong person, or their manager might not be equipped to handle it. So make sure that you have a person on staff who's equipped to handle these requests, and make sure people know where to go for that. Now, the trickier one is religion. So my guidance on this is to assume that it's a bona fide request, but there is no other, you can't really ask for you can ask for additional information, but only if you really have an objective basis for questioning that the nature of the belief or the sincerity of a particular sincerity of their belief is in question. So, the definition of religion under Title VII is super broad. It protects beliefs and practices with which you might be unfamiliar. Again, I sound like a broken record, but you could consult counsel on this to really cover your bases. I'm not an expert on this, but just some rudimentary searching around the internet, there aren't a ton of religions that object to vaccinations. But again, you don't know what you're not an expert either, probably, and you don't know what your employees' faith and belief systems are. And so, if you get a handful of religious exemption requests, it's probably best to go ahead and honor them. There's definitely document it still, and with that form that will be up on our website today, and put that in their file, and then go from there. If you have a critical mass of people, like an entire department or a number of people to the point where you're like, wait a minute, this is going to present an actual logistical issue or a safety issue, take all the requests, and then I would definitely consult counsel on what to do with, just to make sure you have all your options, your bases covered. And that's definitely a tricky one. I'm sorry I don't have a more concrete answer for that one, but you might get this request, and if you do, you need to reach out to somebody to help you navigate it. Definitely do that. All right, here is definitely a question that I don't have a great answer to, but Kevin's going to ask it anyway.
Well, this is in the headlines, and we read about this, both about the COVID vaccine and other vaccines in general. What do I do if I have employees who simply don't trust or believe in the vaccine, or think that it is, something nefarious that should be avoided?
Yep, and this likely will happen for some of you, in which case, I hate to say it, but you should probably consult counsel. And I say this because, and we had a local attorney on about 6 weeks ago to talk about this, and his refrain was, there's just not enough precedent for this type of thing in a public health crisis situation where it's incumbent upon the employer to have a safe workplace, but then you have people who object, and it might not be because of a disability or a religious belief, it's just because they don't believe in it, or they don't want to have it. They think it's a medical procedure and they don't want to have it. There's no guidance out there right now. And like I said, there are some states that have legislation pending that would make it, that would be on the employee side of this equation and protect them over and above a disability or religious belief. And that's why legal counsel would be helpful, because they will be familiar with your local and state laws. So I wish I had a better answer for you. I do hope the EEOC updates us on this area as well. I don't know that they will with their new leadership. We'll have to see, but certainly they've been hearing about it. And again, make it clear in your policy who someone should consult if they have a question or concern. And then whoever that person is, they need to be prepared to address scenario A, which is a disability, scenario B, which is a religious belief, and then scenario C, which is just, I object to the vaccine, I don't think I should get it. Now, if you have a voluntary policy, they can object, and that's great. They might tell you why, they might not tell you why. It's voluntary, so they don't have to get it, and they don't have to tell you why not. If you have a mandatory policy, though, you definitely want to consult counsel before you terminate anybody for this reason. Okay, I do have a question here about what disabilities would be exempt, which is a great question, Anonymous. Certainly there are some autoimmune or immunocompromised conditions that some people might be advised by their physician to not get the vaccine. Pregnancy might be one of them as well. I don't have an actual list of disabilities that would be exempt, and I'm actually, I don't know for sure. I would love to have somebody from the medical community on here one day to talk to us more about that. But that's the disability case. That's the great thing about that instance is they need to have you need to have something in writing from their medical provider. They can't just say I have a disability and I shouldn't get it. If you have a mandatory policy in place, you need to have something from their medical provider. So that's a good check and balance there. And then Kimberly asked, I saw that some companies are offering cash incentives for employees to get the vaccines. My first concern was that in some ways they're penalizing people who cannot get the vaccine for medical or religious reasons, which seems like a liability. Any insight into that? Absolutely, Kimberly. And that's what we were saying earlier is that even pre-COVID, there were companies that got into trouble because they were offering cash incentives for employees to be healthier or to otherwise pursue a wellness goal. And then there were some people on the, who weren't able to do that. And so they missed out on that incentive. So you can't you can offer cash incentives, but you need to work out how you're going to treat the people who are unable to get the vaccine for medical or religious reasons. I mentioned earlier, you could do a collective goal, like if we reach 80% vaccination as a company, then everybody gets $100 or everybody gets a day off. And, and that would have to include the people who were exempt. Doesn't seem necessarily, there's no 100% fair way to treat incentives if you have people who are exempt. All right.
All right, so looking at this question, is the administration of a COVID-19 vaccine to an employee by an employer or by a third party with whom the employer contracts to administer a vaccine a medical examination for purposes of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Great question, Kevin. And the answer is no. So you might hear this, you might hear employees chafe at the vaccine because, it seems icky to have an employer mandate or strongly suggest or incentivize what seems to be a medical examination, but it's not. Technically, the EEOC or the ADA, which is like Kevin said, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which the EEOC is charged with overseeing, technically, they don't consider it an examination. And you'll see here, the medical examinations are, are procedures or tests given by a healthcare professional in a medical setting that seeks information about an individual's physical or mental impairment or health. Examples include vision tests, blood, urine, and breath analyses, blood pressure screening, cholesterol testing, and diagnostic procedures such as x-rays, CAT scans, and MRIs. The EEOC is saying that if a vaccine is administered to an employee by an employer for protection against contracting COVID-19, the employer is not seeking information about an individual's impairments or current health status, and therefore it is not a medical examination. So I included that here because I suspect you might hear some pushback from employees citing it as a medical examination, and it's not officially considered one. And then again, I'm just going to do another confidentiality reminder, and you can write this into your policy too if you think it will mitigate some anxiety. You will adhere to this requirement that you will keep any medical information obtained in the course of your vaccination program confidential, and this means separate from their regular personnel file. And so not only should you say that, but you should actually also do it. I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but when you've got 700 employees and you need to have a separate medical file for all of them, that could be a project. So prepare for that if you need to throw some manpower at this. And like Kevin said, consider the logistics side. The policy piece is sort of the quote easy part. It can be a little dicey depending on which way you go, and it's very important. The policy though, once you've got the policy distributed, you need to make sure you consider how to carry it out and who's going to be involved and who's going to be part of that inner circle, who's going to be accepting the requests, processing requests, and filing this confidential information. Here's another one we get a lot.
All right, Leslie, can we ask an employee to show proof of receipt of a COVID-19 vaccination? And I would add to this, like, um, what really constitutes the receipt?
So when you get the first shot, you get a card that says you need to come back. That basically is like what you redeem when you get a second shot. I haven't, full disclosure, I haven't gotten a shot yet, so I don't have one in hand to show people. But from what my sources tell me, that you get a piece of documentation that shows that you've gotten that first shot, and then presumably after the second shot you get something similar, and so that would suffice. And so if you well, let me answer the question first of all. Yes, you can ask for proof of receipt. There is no guidance about like if you need to keep copies of that receipt. So I don't know if you just need to have your eyeballs on it or if you need to take a scan of it. I mean, you could be really thorough and take a scan of it and file it in their medical file, which would be the most thorough way to go about it, and also would make sure that you have accurate records. Particularly if you have a larger workforce, you might want to think about how you're going to collect those proof of receipts and who's going to do that and how. The one thing you can't do though is ask why someone didn't get the vaccine yet or at all. Because that might require them to answer you with information about a disability that would then trigger the ADA standard that getting information about a disability really has to only be for job related reasons and be consistent with business necessity, which it probably wouldn't be in this case. So if you do require employees to provide proof, you might want to go ahead and warn them that they should just answer yes or no, and not to say why. If they can say why if they want to, but they don't have to, and they shouldn't, and you shouldn't ask why. Let's see. Emily says, would putting the info into iSolved as confidential PHI be considered a separate medical file? Yes, it would, Emily. You can partition it in the confidential PHI folder in iSolved. Okay, another good question.
All right. So what if I have an employee who is exempt due to a bona fide disability, poses a health risk to our other employees?
So this is a kind of a tricky one. And it's a wordy answer and it's not the clearest answer, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it. So basically, again, like I've said a couple times, you're balancing someone's individual rights with the rights of the collective, right? So you're not supposed to knowingly pose a health threat to other individuals in the workplace. So that's why you would have a vaccine policy, because you're trying. Oh, sorry, someone's calling me now. So you would need to, that's why you would have a vaccine policy in the first place, is to have a healthy and safe workplace. However, if somebody's disability or religious belief, well, let's just stick with disability in this case, removes them from that equation, you would need to show that unvaccinated employee would pose a direct threat due to a significant risk of substantial harm to the health or safety of the individual or others that cannot be eliminated or reduced by reasonable accommodation. So what that means is, and if those of you who've ever had a ADA request before, you're familiar with a reasonable accommodation, basically saying, if I come to Kevin and say, hey, Kevin, I can't get the vaccine, I have this legitimate disability, and we work all that out, with a doctor's note, things like that. And Kevin's running a business where we all work closely together, and he's concerned about unvaccinated individuals putting other people at risk, whether that's customers or other employees. He could say, okay, Leslie, that's, I hear you, we're going to work this out, but I'm going to have to move you to a less populated part of the business, or maybe change your hours, or make, quote, some other reasonable accommodation, so to keep the rest of the employees safe. And then you'd basically just do it, work with an interactive process between Kevin and I and perhaps my physician to come up with a plan. Maybe I can work from home. Maybe my office can be moved, my workspace can be moved. There's, reasonable accommodations really depend on, your business, your type of work that you do, your layout, your physical proximity, the cost. It shouldn't be something that, they're not asking you to build a separate building. It can't pose an undue financial burden on you to provide this accommodation. That's why they use the term reasonable. Just to the extent that that leaves open a whole gray area of possibilities. I know that's frustrating, but it just really depends on your situation. And the EEOC does list 4 factors that you should consider when you're sort of determining this assessment of this individual's situation, whether or not there's a direct threat to the other employees or your customers. What's the duration? How long is Leslie around other employees? Is it just for a couple of minutes when I'm dropping off letters in the mailroom, or am I next to other employees all day because I'm running machinery in the print shop and we're all in close quarters? The nature and severity of potential harm, the likelihood that the potential harm will occur, and the imminence of the potential harm. Which all of that is to say, if you have something like this happen, I would consult an attorney if you can, because these are very generic assessment factors that, I would want counsel to really flesh out if I were you, if you had this situation. I mean, duration, the first one's kind of easy, but like number 2, the nature and severity of the potential harm, that's tough for me as a layperson or, a non-attorney to really unpack. And then the likelihood that the harm will occur. I mean, what's the likelihood that I would work closely with another employee and not be vaccinated? And we just don't know enough yet about what vaccinated individuals could likely be, can they still carry it? Can they pass it? We just don't know. So if you have this situation, I would probably consult an attorney and see what your options are, and try to be accommodating as possible. And then we go on to say, so if you do work through those factors and you determine that an unvaccinated individual will expose others to the virus at the work site, you can't exclude the employee from the workplace unless there is no way to provide that reasonable accommodation. So if you can't accommodate them, you can't remove them from others or isolate them or have them work from home or change their shifts, if it's just not possible, then you can exclude them from the workplace, physically entering the workplace. I wouldn't automatically terminate them though. And again, it would be a great time to consult counsel, because even though the EEOC says don't automatically terminate them, I don't know what the long-term play is here. If the vaccine is completely off the table for them forever and they just won't ever get it, and you're sort of in this situation where you have this employee that you don't want to terminate, but you can't make this accommodation, I would consult with an attorney on your options. Because like I said earlier, there's not a lot of precedent for this. So right now we just don't have a lot of clear guidance, which I know is frustrating, but hopefully you won't have this happen to you. But if you do, you can be sort of go ahead and start thinking now how you would react to it and what you would do.
All right. So what happens if an employer cannot exempt or provide a reasonable accommodation to an employee who cannot comply with a mandatory vaccine policy because of a disability or a sincerely held religious practice or belief?
So what we're saying here is basically, like I just said was before, if you can't provide a reasonable accommodation to an employee if you're doing a mandatory policy because of disability or religious belief, and you can't make a reasonable accommodation, like I said, you can exclude them, but you may not automatically terminate them. And I would consult with an attorney, because again, we just don't have a lot of precedent, and I would hate for you to be on the receiving end of a wrongful termination lawsuit. And it's very, very tricky. I mean, as we move through 2021, and there'll be more presumably litigation cases that come through the system, and we'll be able to see how the courts are deciding things. We'll be able to get a better sense. But right now, we just don't have enough to go on for this. So as we've always say on this program, document everything, have a plan in place ahead of time, work through the scenarios with your leadership team, and so that you're prepared for any of these scenarios. And then your employees know that you have, you've got a plan in place, and you're going to do the very best you can to observe their rights as well as keep your business afloat. And that's just really where we are right now. It's very frustrating, I know, but this is where we are in this pandemic. So that was my last official question. Kevin, did you have anything that was sort of lingering as we've talked through this today?
No, I mean, I think that your insight around this topic has been super valuable. I would just sort of add sort of a little call to action or friendly reminder to everybody listening that as you're thinking about these things, it's easy to get into the weeds, I think, on perhaps an individual employee or a specific accommodation. And sometimes I think it might be really helpful to take that step back and remember that, there is the other side of this. We will get through this, and really just make your best effort to be accommodating towards your employees. I mean, there's a reason that they were hired in the first place. Nobody's out there that, let's not operate from a place of somebody trying to take advantage or, get one over on their employer. And, let's try and come up with policy and accommodations that get people safely to a place where work looks, a lot more normal. And yeah, that may involve talking to a lawyer, and there absolutely are going to be uncomfortable conversations, difficult ones through this whole process. But I would just sort of, urge everybody to come from a place of, trying to do right by everybody. Ultimately, keeping safe workplaces is in everybody's interest. That's just my soapbox for the day.
Yeah, no, I like it. And yeah, for sure. I mean, I always have said, it's all about the long game, right? I mean, we're just trying to get back to some semblance of normal. And this is what we have to go on, is this vaccine. And we're lucky to have it for, in my opinion, we're lucky to have it. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but it's a lever we can pull right now. And so
Right.
we're trying to help you pull that lever in a way that makes sense for everybody and for your business, so that you can, have customers and revenue this year, and hopefully grow and recover and grow, or whatever it is that you need to do in order to get you back to where you were before this pandemic, and hopefully to a better place. So with that, there is a question. Sorry, just saw that come in. Our friend Mike has an observation. Interestingly enough, with all our teachers receiving their vaccination, second round this week, we have one standout who is concerned about the safety of the vaccine. Parents who have children in her classroom are concerned with her possibly exposing COVID to their children, and could possibly withdraw over their concerns. See, now, Mike, that's definitely an example of an impact on your business, of somebody not getting the vaccine. And so you're going to have to prepare for, how you handle that. And I'd love to hear, Mike, how you guys are handling that, because that's certainly a ripple effect. And Mike runs a childcare center, so that's in the education realm, and that's definitely an industry that is doing mandatory vaccines at this point. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I appreciate that.
And I would just chime in that Lynette sent us a nice comment saying, very informative. Thank you. It's a tricky time that we all live in. Lynette, I couldn't agree with you more, and appreciate you tuning in. We hope this is helpful.
Yeah, it is tricky. And I lied. We didn't take 30 minutes. We took 55 minutes. So sorry about that, guys, but hopefully you'll find this helpful. And we will post these slides and the recording of our conversation today on our website by 5 o'clock today. You go to dominionpayroll.com, click on the bar at the top that says COVID resources, and you'll see 2 pages. One page lists our webinars that are, well, at the top of the page will be webinars, upcoming webinars, and then you scroll down, there's a catalog of webinars that have already occurred. So you'll find this one here. And then the other page you'll see in that area is forms and info, I believe it's called. And that's the one that will have the sample vaccination policies for mandatory or involuntary, and then the exemption request forms for disabilities and religious, those of religious nature. So we'll have all that up on the site by 5 o'clock today, Eastern time. If you log off today and you have a question that pops into your head, you can send it to questions@dominionpayroll.com, or you can consult your attorney or your HR department, or hopefully somebody out there who can help you. But we're always happy to help, whether you're a client or not. Send it to us at questions@dominionpayroll.com. Kevin, thanks so much for being my wingman today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to spend an extended half hour with you.
No one's going to trust my time estimates ever again, but that's okay. Appreciate you guys. Have a nice afternoon. Stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Again, 11 o'clock, we'll be back with a discussion about hiring and employee engagement in the COVID era. Have a great day.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.